Imagine just one single day, a day that really shattered a nation's innocence. And it still haunts the collective memory, doesn't it? Even now, over 6 decades later.
It really does.
So today, we're embarking on a deep dive into one of America's most enduring mysteries, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
And we've got a lot to work with. You've given us this stack of sources, official reports, eyewitness accounts, declassified documents, forensic analyses. It's quite the collection.
Yeah, it's a rich mix and often conflicting.
Yeah.
So our mission really is to navigate all this material, try to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights.
We'll unpack the known facts, look at the official conclusions, sure, but also delve into those competing theories.
And hopefully understand why this tragedy remains such a profound national wound.
So let's set the scene. It's Friday, November 22, 1963, Dallas, Texas.
There's this electric feeling in the air, anticipation for President Kennedy's visit. It's part of his campaign prep.
Right, and this is the era people called Camelot. It symbolized youth, energy, charm. JFK was, well, he was famously the first president truly made for the camera.
Meticulously crafting that image, fostering a sense of closeness, of hope.
A hope that made what happened next just all the more devastating.
And then, Dealey Plaza, everything changed. The motorcade route itself, it was designed for close public viewing, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Estimates are around 200,000 people lining the streets. Everyone wanted to see the president.
But that design, the closeness, it became the stage for something that created, well, not clarity, but incredible confusion.
That's exactly right. And as the motorcade made that sharp turn, from Houston Street onto Elm Street.
A presidential limousine, it slowed right down significantly. What was the impact of that moment?
Oh, it was crucial. That slow turn made the car an exposed target, slow-moving in a really complex open space.
And then, around 12:30 p.m.,
the first shot, it rang out. But many witnesses, even Jackie Kennedy, they initially thought it was maybe a firecracker or a motorcycle backfiring. Shows how disorienting it was.
So not immediately recognized as gunfire by everyone.
Not at all. And this first bullet, it struck President Kennedy, upper back, maybe the neck area. The Warren Commission later said this same bullet went on to injure Governor John Connally.
Connally, who was sitting right in front of the president.
Yes. Then shortly after, more shots, at least one more. The final fatal one hit the back of the president's head. Instant death.
Just horrific.
Yeah.
And the immediate aftermath, utter chaos.
Pandemonium in the motorcade. That heartbreaking image of Jackie Kennedy climbing onto the trunk of the car.
Trying to retrieve something is just seared into everyone's memory.
The limousine then sped off to Parkland Memorial Hospital. Desperate efforts there.
But it was too late. He was pronounced dead at 1:00 p.m. Severe head injury.
And just hours later, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in on Air Force One, flying back to D.C.
The official end of the Camelot era. Just like that.
Gone in an instant.
It seems so counterintuitive, though. An event happening in broad daylight. Hundreds of witnesses, multiple cameras rolling.
You'd think it would lead to clarity, right?
Exactly. But instead, it seemed to create more confusion. A fog of conflicting accounts. Why do you think that happened? All that sensory input.
That's a really profound point. And it's central to why this mystery just won't go away. Usually, crime investigations, they rely on piecing together circumstantial evidence, maybe forensic details found later.
Right. Not hundreds of direct eyewitnesses.
Precisely. Here, you had this overwhelming direct sensory input. But people under extreme stress, in shock, in the middle of pandemonium, they process things differently. Subjectively.
So different people saw and heard different things.
Absolutely. Take Howard Brennan. He claimed he saw a shooter up in the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository.
Okay, that fits the official narrative.
It does. But
Yeah.
then many other witnesses insisted they heard shots coming from the grassy knoll, that area to the front and right of the motorcade. Totally different direction.
And even the Zapruder film, the most famous piece of evidence.
It's silent. It captures the visuals, undeniably powerful visuals, but no sound. So you're left interpreting where the sounds might have come from based on reactions, which just fuels debate.
So the very public nature of it, instead of providing a single truth, it created these competing narratives right from the very beginning.
Exactly. Endless material for speculation, for conspiracy theories. It was baked in from the start.
Okay, so with that chaos in Dealey Plaza, attention inevitably focused on one man, Lee Harvey Oswald. The official narrative puts him right at the center.
But his story, it's far from simple, isn't it? Not just a straightforward suspect.
No, What was his background like? What set him on this very unusual path?
Well, Oswald was born in 1939. He had a difficult childhood, moved around a lot, joined the U.S. Marines.
Where he was rated a capable marksman, I
It
recall.
was, but he was also court-martialed twice. And it was around this time he started showing this open interest in socialist, communist ideologies.
And then the defection, 1959, to the Soviet Union. That's a huge step during the Cold War.
A massive, deeply symbolic act. He tried to get Soviet citizenship, failed, lived in Minsk for a while, met and married Marina Prusakova there.
But he didn't stay.
No, he apparently grew disillusioned with Soviet life. He returned to the U.S. with his family in June 1962. But that whole Soviet chapter, it just added layers of suspicion later on.
And his radicalism, it seemed to ramp up significantly in 1963, the year of the assassination.
It really did. That year marks a real escalation. He mail-ordered weapons, a revolver, a rifle, using an alias, Alec J. Hidell.
The rifle being the Mannlicher Carcano later found in the depository.
Correct. Then there was an alleged assassination attempt in April on General Edwin Walker, a right-wing figure. The shot missed.
Okay, so a history of potential political violence brewing.
Seems that way. He then moved to New Orleans, got involved supporting Fidel Castro, the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, tried to travel to Cuba, the Soviet Union again via Mexico City. It shows a man tangled in this web of, well, extreme ideologies and actions.
And then the final pieces fall into place, almost too neatly. October 1963, he's back in Dallas.
And gets a job at the Texas School Book Depository, the very building overlooking Dealey Plaza where the shots came from.
After the assassination, he leaves the depository, then the encounter with Officer J.D. Tippit.
Right. When stopped by Tippit, Oswald fatally shot him, fled again. He was finally arrested later at the Texas Theater.
And during interrogation, his famous line,
He denied everything, claimed he was just a patsy, asked for a lawyer linked to the U.S. Communist Party, a request that was denied.
a patsy, that word hangs over everything.
It really does. And then, just as this official story is solidifying around him, this absolutely stunning twist.
Oswald's own death.
And November 24th, just 2 days after Kennedy's assassination, he's being transferred from the Dallas police station live on national television.
And Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner, steps out and shoots him, point blank.
Ruby, who had rumored ties to the mafia. He claimed he did it out of anger, grief for Kennedy. He was convicted, but that conviction was later reversed. He died of cancer before any retrial could happen.
So the man who claimed he was a patsy, the only one who could potentially explain his actions or any conspiracy, is silenced. Permanently.
Yeah.
On live TV.
It's almost unbelievable, and this is where Oswald becomes this fundamental paradox.
The perfect suspect and the perfect patsy. Explain that. How could he be both?
Okay, so as the perfect suspect, his unstable past, his extremist views, the documented violent shooting Officer Tippit, plus the physical evidence. He worked in the building, his rifle was found there, he had the marksmanship skills. It all pointed directly at him. Made him the ideal candidate for a lone shooter explanation. Case closed, right?
Seems plausible on the surface. But then, the patsy angle.
Exactly. His history was just too complex, too weird for him to be just a lone nut. The defection to the USSR during the height of the Cold War, his Soviet wife, that contradictory pro-Castro activism while having lived in Russia, the mysterious trip to Mexico City trying to contact Cuban and Soviet embassies.
It smells like intelligence connections or being manipulated.
It certainly made him seem like an ideal pawn for someone the CIA, KGB, Mafia, Cubans, you name it. Someone could have set him up. And then his claim, I'm just a patsy, followed by his incredibly convenient public murder by Ruby.
It didn't close the case at all.
Not remotely. It blew it wide open, permanently eliminated the one person who might have had answers. It embedded that perfect patsy paradox right into the heart of the story, forever.
Which leads us directly to the first major attempt to provide official answers, the Warren Commission.
Right. Set up quickly by President Johnson, November 29th, 1963, chaired by Chief Justice Earl Warren himself.
Their mandate was clear. A thorough investigation, present all the facts. They worked for 10 months, produced this massive near 900-page report.
And their conclusion was, well, unequivocal.
Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Fired 3 shots from that 6th-floor window, killed Kennedy, injured Governor Connally.
And Jack Ruby also acted alone in killing Oswald. Critically, they stated they found no credible evidence of any conspiracy, domestic or foreign. Full stop.
But, and it's a huge but, the most controversial, most debated part of that report is the single bullet theory.
Ah, yes. Often called the magic bullet theory, usually with sarcasm.
Why was this theory so crucial to their conclusion? And why does it still cause so much argument?
It's absolutely the heart of the controversy. It was essential because of timing. The Zapruder film, when analyzed, suggested there just wasn't enough time between shots for Oswald's bolt-action rifle to fire, reload, and fire again to cause separate non-fatal wounds in both Kennedy and Connally.
Okay, so the physics of the rifle and the timing seen on film created a problem for the lone gunman theory.
A huge problem. So to make the Oswald acted alone conclusion work, they needed one bullet to account for all the non-fatal wounds on both men.
So describe this journey. Commission Exhibit 399, or CE 399. This one bullet, supposedly.
Supposedly entered JFK's upper back, exited his throat, then continued into Governor Connally's back, shattered one of his ribs, exited his chest, passed clean through his right wrist, breaking a bone there.
Wait, it broke bones after passing through two bodies.
According to the theory, yes. And finally, it lodged superficially in Connally's left thigh.
Wow, okay. One bullet, 7 wounds, 2 men, 2 broken bones. It sounds less like a conclusion drawn from evidence and more like
a narrative necessity. That's a good way to put it. It seems it was essentially reverse engineered, perhaps most notably by investigator Arlen Specter. They faced that timing problem.
So they started with the answer they needed one shooter, one bullet causing those wounds, and worked backward.
It appears that way. To create a trajectory, however improbable it seemed, that fit all the known wounds within the time constraints. It was a logical solution to maintain the lone gunman narrative, but maybe not the most natural interpretation of the physical evidence itself.
And it drew criticism immediately, right? The trajectory seemed impossible to many. And the bullet itself, CE 399.
Found on a hospital gurney, some dispute. It was even Connally's gurney, and it looked remarkably undamaged, almost pristine, some said.
Hardly what you'd expect after causing all that damage breaking bones.
Exactly. How could it be so intact? Plus, you had doctors at Parkland Hospital initially describing Kennedy's neck wound as an entrance wound, not an exit wound. That contradicts the theory.
And Governor Connally himself, didn't he always maintain he was hit by a separate shot?
He did. He said his reaction time, visible in the Zapruder film, was later than Kennedy's initial reaction, suggesting 2 distinct shots. And the physics of that bullet retaining enough energy to shatter Connally's wrist after passing through Kennedy's neck and Connally's chest. It seemed unlikely to many. The whole zigzag path felt like it defied physics.
Okay, so major criticisms from the start, but this isn't just old history. There's been a bombshell development, hasn't there, relatively recently?
Yes. This is where it gets really fascinating, even today. Former Secret Service agent Paul Landis published a memoir in 2023.
And he had a startling claim about that specific bullet, CE 399.
He did. Landis claims he found the bullet, not on a gurney at the hospital, but in the presidential limousine, on the back seat, right behind where Kennedy had been sitting.
Whoa. Not on a gurney, but in the car.
Yes. He says he then picked it up and placed it on Kennedy's gurney at the hospital because he was afraid it would get lost in the chaos.
Okay, stop. The implications of that are enormous.
They're profound because if Landis is correct and the bullet was found in the car, likely having fallen out of Kennedy's back wound,
then it could not have gone on to hit Connally.
Exactly. It stopped its journey with Kennedy, which means Connally must have been hit by a different bullet.
And if Connally was hit by a different bullet, given the timing constraints,
it necessitates a second shooter. Oswald couldn't have reloaded and fired his bolt-action rifle that quickly to hit both men separately.
So this one piece of testimony from a Secret Service agent who was right there, it could potentially unravel the entire official narrative that stood for over 60 years.
It's a potential game changer. It directly challenges the chain of custody and the core logic of the single bullet theory, which is the foundation of the Warren Commission's conclusion.
Amazing how new information can still surface after all this time. Now, beyond reports and testimony, there's that film, the Zapruder film.
Arguably the most famous and perhaps infamous home movie ever made.
Abraham Zapruder, a Dallas tailor. His 8mm camera captured just 26.6 seconds, 486 frames. But it's the only known complete moving footage of the assassination itself.
It was immediately seen as critical evidence, obviously. Used extensively by the Warren Commission, but access was restricted for years, wasn't it?
It was. And when it was finally broadcast nationally, I think it was 1975, what was the reaction?
It was a shockwave. Seeing the actual event unfiltered after years of still photos and diagrams, it reignited public interest and, frankly, fueled a whole new wave of conspiracy theories.
And the debate often boils down to specific frames, right?
Yes. Frames around 210 to 225 show Kennedy and Connally reacting, which ties back to the single bullet theory debate we just discussed. Did they react simultaneously or sequentially?
But the most iconic, the most debated frame has to be frame 313.
Without a doubt, that's the moment of the fatal headshot, and it shows Kennedy's head snapping violently
Back and to the left.
back into the left. For countless people watching that, it's just irrefutable proof. A shot must have come from the front right, from the grassy knoll area.
It's such powerful, visceral imagery. The Zapruder himself was deeply disturbed by it.
So much so that he requested that specific frame, 313, not be publicly released initially.
But that motion back and to the left, while it seems obvious evidence of a frontal shot, like everything else in this case, it's ambiguous, isn't it?
It is. Forensic analysts have offered alternative explanations. One is the jet effect, the idea that brain matter exploding out the front right of the head could create an opposite reaction, pushing the head back and left.
Okay, like Newton's third law, action-reaction.
Sort of. Another explanation is a severe neuromuscular spasm caused by the catastrophic brain injury, causing the muscles to contract violently in that direction.
And then there are even claims the film itself was altered.
Yes, those claims exist too, suggesting tampering to perhaps conceal evidence of multiple shooters or different shot origins. It just adds more layers of uncertainty.
So the film ends up being less like definitive forensic proof and more like a, what did you call it, a cultural Rorschach test.
Exactly. What you see in the Zapruder film seems to depend heavily on what you already believe. It confirms pre-existing biases rather than settling the question.
It shows what happened graphically,
Yeah,
but not definitively how or from where.
precisely. If you accept the Warren Commission's findings, you'll likely accept the jet effect or neuromuscular spasm explanation for the head snap, fitting the lone shooter from behind.
But if you're skeptical, you see simple physics. An object struck from behind moves forward. An object struck from the front moves back. Back into the left means a shot from the front. Conspiracy.
And the film's silence, the lack of that crucial audio evidence to pinpoint the shot's origins, means it can't resolve the debate. It just perpetuates it. It's this raw, violent wound shown to everyone, but agreed upon by almost no one.
Okay, so the Warren Commission delivers its report in '64. Decades pass. Then, in the 1970s, amidst a different climate.
Yes, a climate of deep public skepticism, especially after Watergate. Trust in government was low.
And Congress decides to take another look.
Exactly. In 1976, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, the HSCA, was formed. Their job was to reinvestigate both the JFK assassination and the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.
And their final report in 1979, well, it didn't exactly rubber stamp the Warren Commission, did it?
Not at all. It delivered a truly startling conclusion, directly contradicting Warren.
What did the HSCA find?
Well, they agreed with Warren that Oswald fired the shots that killed Kennedy. However, they concluded there was a high probability that there had been a conspiracy.
A high probability of conspiracy from an official congressional committee. That's huge.
It was massive, and this conclusion rested primarily on one very controversial piece of evidence.
Oh, it was.
Disputed acoustic evidence. It came from a Dallas police radio recording made on something called a dictabelt, an old audio recording medium.
And this recording supposedly captured.
It supposedly captured the sounds of the shots in Dealey Plaza, and analysts for the HSCA concluded it recorded 4 shots, not 3, and critically that the 4th shot seemed to come from a different direction.
Let me guess. The grassy knoll.
The grassy knoll, exactly, suggesting a second shooter.
So the HSCA didn't just find fault with the Warren Commission's conclusion, they also criticized the original investigation itself.
They did. They found the original FDI and Warren Commission probes to be seriously flawed. However, it gets complicated again.
Of course it does.
The HSCA's own key evidence, that acoustic recording, was later challenged. The National Academy of Sciences reviewed it and basically deemed it inconclusive. They couldn't confirm a 4th shot or its origin.
So even the second official investigation ended with uncertainty and dispute over its core evidence.
Precisely, adding yet another layer of conflict. But the impact of the HSCA report was undeniable, regardless of the later challenges to its evidence.
How so? What was its main significance?
It legitimized conspiracy theories in the mainstream. Before the HSCA, it was basically the official Warren report versus, independent researchers' authors seen by some as fringe.
But now you had 2 official government investigations with conflicting conclusions.
Exactly. The HSCA, an official body of the U.S. Congress, formally questioned the Warren report. Their finding of a probable conspiracy created this official schism. It gave the public permission, in a sense, to doubt the original story, based not just on speculation, but on official government doubt.
So even if their acoustic evidence was later debunked, the damage to the Warren Commission's definitive lone gunman conclusion was permanent.
Absolutely. The HSCA report basically sanctioned the questioning of the government's narrative. It moved the whole idea of a conspiracy from the fringes into the realm of officially acceptable debate.
Which leads us neatly into that vast, sprawling landscape of conspiracy theories themselves. Why did they take such deep root? We've touched on some reasons.
It's that perfect storm, isn't it? The,
Yeah.
the perceived implausibility of the single bullet theory for so many people, Oswald's shocking murder before he could talk, the flaws in the Warren Commission that the HSCA later highlighted, and that Zapruder film, so powerful, so graphic, yet ultimately ambiguous.
It's interesting you mentioned the term itself, conspiracy theory. There's a story behind that too, isn't there?
There is. It's reported, though debated, that the term was actually popularized, maybe even weaponized by the CIA after the assassination, specifically to discredit critics of the Warren Report, to frame skepticism as somehow irrational or paranoid.
Okay, let's briefly touch on some of the major theories out there. Not to endorse any, but just to understand the landscape. Who are the main suspects in these alternative narratives?
Well, one major category points to the mafia. The motivation. Revenge. Attorney General Robert Kennedy, JFK's brother, had launched a very aggressive crackdown on organized crime.
Okay, motive established. Who else?
Anti-Castro Cuban exiles. They felt betrayed by the Kennedy administration, particularly after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. Deep anger there.
Then there are theories involving elements within the U.S. government itself.
Yes, the CIA or the broader military-industrial complex. The alleged motive here is Kennedy's perceived shift in policy, his apparent softness on communism, his pursuit of détente with the Soviets, maybe even plans to withdraw from Vietnam, all seen as threats to their power and influence.
And given Oswald's history, the Soviet Union or KGB must have been suspected too.
Naturally, revenge for the humiliation of the Cuban Missile Crisis was floated as a motive. Oswald's defection made him a convenient link, though concrete evidence supporting direct KGB involvement is generally considered very thin by most investigators.
And all these theories have been fueled over the years by documents, right? The JFK Records Act.
Yes, the act in 1992 led to millions of pages being declassified. More were released under President Trump.
Did they provide the answers? The smoking gun everyone's looking for?
Not really. They provided incredible detail, revealed a lot about Cold War paranoia, covert operations, intelligence agency activities. But no single document emerged saying, here's the conspiracy. In many ways, the documents just generated more questions, more connections to investigate, further fueling speculation rather than ending it.
So when we stand back and look at the last 60-plus years, what's the biggest, most lasting legacy of this event?
It's hard to overstate it, but I think it's the profound cynicism and distrust it created. Distrust of the American public towards its own government.
The end of an innocence, as you said earlier.
Absolutely. The end of a certain kind of faith in national institutions. The idea that powerful people, maybe even factions within the government, could conspire to kill a president and then cover it up, that moved from unthinkable to a mainstream belief for a significant portion of the population. It eroded public trust in a way that resonates even today.
And culturally, it's never gone away. It's this unhealed wound.
Constantly revisited. Books, documentaries, movies. Oliver Stone's JFK film in the early 90s was huge, introducing the whole conspiracy narrative to a new generation.
And the polls still show it, right?
Yeah.
Most Americans don't buy the official story.
Consistently. Year after year, Gallup polls show a majority of Americans do not believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. The official narrative simply hasn't convinced the public.
So why? Why does this assassination, more than others perhaps, maintain such an iron grip on the American imagination? What's the final thought we leave people with?
I think it's that unique, toxic combination. You have a beloved, charismatic leader executed in public view. You have an official investigation that was, by later official accounts, deeply flawed, relying on theories many find unbelievable.
You have the prime suspect dramatically silenced before he can ever stand trial or tell his story.
And you have this body of evidence, eyewitnesses, the Zapruder film, the documents that's vast, but ultimately ambiguous, open to endless interpretation.
So the search for answers isn't just history buffs digging through files.
No, it feels more fundamental than that. It's like a quest to understand a moment that knocked America off its axis. A moment of trauma from which, in many ways, the country's still trying to recover, still trying to make sense of.